Good day. Welcome to Rockland Talk Radio. I'm John Marino. We are produced by Sharc Creative. We are made possible by Robeson Oil, the house that service built. By Lipolis Electric. Don't be left in the dark. Get Lipolis. By Hightower Westchester, managing your wealth up and down the Hudson Valley to a fiduciary standard. By White Plains Hospital, by Michael Labriola, Landscape Design and Construction of Armonk, and by Tompkins Mahopac Bank. Here on the Cup of Joe Political Show, we are joined by Rockland County Executive Ed Day. Welcome back to Rockland Talk Radio. We are almost 2 years into a pandemic now. Do you feel like we are moving out of this pandemic step by step, or are we just going in circles with variant after variant?
I think we are in fact moving out of the pandemic. For sure. I think we are going in circles for a variety of reasons. None of them have anything to do with the virus, frankly. I think it's really a matter of messaging that comes from various levels of government. We really just serve to confuse more often than not. But the fact of the matter is, here in Rockland, which is what I focus on, is that our numbers have recently been decreasing. So we've been seeing an improvement in the infection rate. And again, we're talking about positive cases. That could be someone, an orphan is someone who is asymptomatic. So it doesn't mean somebody is actively sick. It just means that they are testing positive for the virus. We look at the amount of people who are testing positive and compared to a hospitalization, which in my informed view is extremely important, because as you remember, in Rockland County, we had sometimes we had about 350 people in the hospitals, and the ICUs filled up, at any one given time. Now we're in the area of 20 to 30 hospitalizations as a general rule. So we're looking at typically 2 to 3% of the number of reported infections. That 2 or 3% of that number is hospitalized people. So it's a very, very low number. Our vaccination rate is very high. And I've been very clear, we were the first county in the state to be honest with the people of Rockland because of the panic-driven efforts that were being done by many others. We revealed to people that the vaccination is not an all-encompassing or a panacea for this virus. We reported that at times we saw roughly 1/3 of the people hospitalized were fully vaccinated. And I don't say that to tell people that the vaccine's a failure. What I tell people is, let's be honest about what we're dealing with them. And John, as you know, I've been saying from day one, we need to learn to live with this issue and make best judgments. Understand that there's always a risk. An upper respiratory vaccine is often not going to deal with every variant. We know that. This is found in medicine. So what I tell people is this: I myself got vaccinated. I felt it was a right decision for me at 70 years of age. The only comorbidity I had was prostate cancer that now is under control. So I thought it was a small move for me. What we can say with some certainty is that if you are vaccinated and you do not have any other issues going on within you, that the duration of the infection, should you get it, or hospitalization even, should that happen, will be shortened, and the intensity of what happens to you will be softer. Those things I think we're comfortable saying. We certainly know that obviously the vaccine is not a cure. It's a tool that can be used to minimize any potential damage that could happen to you. So, again, in Rockland County, we're approaching 80% of the 18 plus population being vaccinated. And when you look at our 65 plus grouping of people, we're just under 93% are vaccinated. So when you ask the question of, where do we stand? Well, I think we stand well because the vast majority of people in Rockland are now vaccinated. We're happy to report that. Again, I think that does help the overall picture of what's going on, both for each person involved, but also for those who are near them. I think that's and part of your concern for your local community. I think this is all positive.
Do you feel like we have herd immunity now with so many people vaccinated, and more, I'm sure, still to get vaccinated when they see the light if they have not as of yet?
It depends how you describe herd immunity. And obviously, we had a situation here in Rockland a couple of years back in regards to the measles. Now, herd immunity for the measles is pretty much no one ever gets measles. That's herd immunity. We don't have that here. So if you're going to mention if herd immunity is going to be the topic, we have to kind of really define what that really is. I think to the extent that having so many people immunized here in Rockland County, when you compare it to the number of hospitalizations, which I think is probably the best measure we can have as to the severity of the virus, when you compare those two things, the picture now and the picture back in 2020, not even close to each other, not even close. I mean, there's a complete difference in situation. And this is where, one has to wonder just how far do we take it as it relates to forcing people to get vaccinated or the threat of losing their job, because we're creating in some places situations that are very counterproductive, to say the least. Do
you feel like life is pretty much back to normal, to pre-pandemic style life?
I think people can choose at this point to choose to have life back to normal. That's in some ways almost a personal decision. There's no reason why you should not feel normal. This is my view. Again, some will argue with that. Some will say, but we still have the virus. We still could get it. And if you hear how I say that, you hear the anxiousness in my voice. That's what you'll hear from people. And certainly, everybody's entitled to feel as they will because they have to be comfortable with their own skin. Nobody should ever criticize that. But I think you can choose a level of comfort and normalcy right now because at the end of the day, we're dealing with a virus that 2 to 3% of those people who get the infection just merely test positive are being hospitalized. You're looking at hospitalization rates 10% of what they were at the worst part of the pandemic. That has to tell us things are better. You're looking at a vaccination rate in Rockland County in the almost 80 and 90% range, on 93% range for our senior citizens. So normalcy has been achieved by the numbers, by and large. So again, I ask people at this point that recognize those things, recognize the good, recognize the positive, because you all too often hear sensationalism and politicism. We don't do that here in Rockland. We're being honest with people. I have seen, because we have done our Facebook Live with people, we've seen the responses from people. The responses we're getting now, when we give people the honest assessment of what we see and what is going on, has changed significantly from the reaction we were getting early on, where the state and the federal government was pretty much running the show and essentially really making anxiety the lunch matter of the day, which is just anxiety.
You bring up an interesting point, and I think you're the first person throughout this pandemic, and since we were able to get the vaccine, to term the situation this way, that getting back to a normal life is a personal choice, basically, at this point. You are the first person to use those kind of words and that terminology about the situation and where it is right now. We see schools trying to get back to normal, and then we see those who are opposed to maybe ever getting back to normal in schools. Is this a union thing? Because no matter to me where you stand on the issue, if you say, I don't want to go back and teach because I'm afraid something could happen, I could get sick, I understand that. If you are offered the vaccine, get a vaccine, go back to work, and you still say no, well, some might say that person just may not want to work, and we're talking about some teachers in particular.
I'm not going to get too deep into this. I will say this though, that let's be honest about this. As serious as COVID is and has been, we can't minimize that. This is not Ebola. This is not measles. This is not polio. I don't think my own feeling, and when I say my own feeling as it relates to people, I have 1,750 employees here. The mandatory vaccination effort has gone well beyond where it should go, in my view. I think that we have people who stood a post and were there for us on the front lines during the worst of the pandemic, and now we're taking their jobs away. I think there's something grotesque about that. And the irony, in my opinion, John, is that one of the reasons why we've gotten here, some of the same people, and your listeners will know this. Some of the same people who were screaming they would not take the vaccine for political reasons, nothing else. They were calling it our previous president's vaccine. They would not take the vaccine because it was, and that's politicism. Okay, they're the same people now threatening people's jobs to get vaccinated or else. I think there's something very grotesque about that. I think the American people are smart enough to understand when you give them the truth, when you give them in a calm manner what you can expect to see and what you can expect out of a vaccine and whatever, they're going to make a decision that makes sense for them. But let's put this in perspective. I mean, the reality, when you drill down to the realities of this virus, what we're finding out is one of the largest drivers of this virus is living room spread. That was something that we knew a year ago. So it's not shocking. So it's, I think there's an overreaction, but the overreaction really has been driven by a lot of the talking heads, a lot of the people in government who really, for no other reason other than to further their own political ambition, will come out with almost anything. We have studies coming from all over the place. We have no idea who these people are. We recently had a story in the USA Today, maybe 3 weeks ago. The headline was, this panel of scientists say booster shot will likely not be necessary. Now, you can imagine that got my attention, and I started reading through it. There was no connection that I could see between the FDA with CDC. It was a panel of star-studded scientists. Okay, that sounds great. So now we have something that the average person reads, and now saying, hey, this star-studded panel of scientists says, guess what? We're not going to need a booster. That's near reckless in my view. I mean, who are these people? And we have the media getting the information out. We have social media, which really can be very unhelpful in times like this, obviously, because anybody can throw anything they want out there. You don't even know what's true anymore. So the management of information is critically important in crisis. And we're not saying that to hide something, but if you look at emergency management situations, which again, my background, I've had command and executive authority in 2 police departments. When you have a crisis, the most important thing that has to happen out of the gate is calm. You have to establish calm, and you have to establish an honesty with what's going on. That did not happen with this. There was nothing but anxiousness conveyed. You remember our former governor, he was discussing issues with schools, and we were all watching his TV show, which I know he enjoyed. He had a great time talking TV. And he turns around and he makes a comment along the lines of, well, if that was my child, I wouldn't send my child to school. And the comment that was made in my executive staff meeting was that the governor of New York just scared the Jesus out of every parent in New York State. What do you accomplish by that?
He also said I wouldn't send my mother to a nursing home right now.
Exactly. Well, for good reason. But he sent the other ones there. But I mean, for what do you accomplish as a leader by doing that? Nothing. You make things worse. And this is because instead of having the professionals run the show out of the gate, which are our health departments who were trained to do this, and in Rockland County, we had more than just trained personnel. We had personnel who actually did this with the measles a year earlier. So anyway, look, we are where we are now. I'm hopeful that, I'm hopeful that the messaging that comes out from the various levels of government and through our medical experts is designed more to reach people, to have them join in an effort to concern themselves appropriately about public health. That's the important issue.
Rockland County Executive Ed Day here on Rockland Talk Radio. I'm John Marino, the Cup of Joe political show. As we head out of 2021 now and head into 2022, the 2022 Rockland County budget. How close to normal would you say this is based upon us getting back to a pre-pandemic way of life?
The 2022 budget is the first budget we put together that I can actually say that I'm very, very glad to see. And this was an effort over 8 years in the making. Remember, we were in a situation, we had a $138 million deficit. We were the most fiscally stressed county in the state of New York. We had $42,000 in the bank after making payroll in third week of January 2014. Our bonds were one step above junk. We were near bankruptcy. You could not have gotten much worse at this point. Where we are now, that $138 million surplus deficit is now a $90 million surplus. We've had about 14 bond upgrades. Bond upgrades that save real money, and I explain this to people we have a hobby garage we're building right now, and the savings we have because of our bond ratings is about $2.5 million. That's about the equivalent of a 2% county property tax increase. So these are real dollars. We no longer borrow money to revenue anticipation notes to make our payroll, for example. We are moving out of bonding everything because we had no money. We are now, like, for example, vehicles. Vehicles were being bonded for one very good reason. Rockland County was near broke. We are now making our department heads ensure that within their budget that there is monies for things such as vehicles, which they should not be capital expenditures. We are being aggressive on infrastructure. I firmly believe politicians love putting off infrastructure improvements because they'd rather leave it for the next person, because it means spending money now. It means biting the bullet now. That's what that's called. I will not delay necessary infrastructure work to dump it on our kids and our grandkids. That is, again, I've used the word grotesque again. It's just not right. You also dump a cost of 3, 4, and 5 times the amount of the project when you wait that long. But here's the best part of this. The property tax increase for Rockland County in 2022 is zero. Zero. No county property tax increase. Bear in mind, we came from a place where we had double-digit tax increases for 3 years running. 30, 18, and 11% in the 3 years prior to my coming into office. Those days are gone. We have a lean organization here in Rockland County. We are now moving out of emergency management. We're now moving to positions where we can operate in a calm manner as opposed to an emergency mode, which you can't keep that up forever. So things are going very well right now in Rockland. We have the American Rescue Plan funding that we are working on getting that into Rockland County's communities as an investment. And to be clear to people, the monies that the federal government, is giving us has authorized us. It's about $63 million over a couple of years. That money is completely separate and apart from our budget. It would be reckless to start mixing the two for 2 reasons. One, federal government finds out you did that, they will come back and claw that money back later on, and that would create a huge deficit, number one. And number two, whatever you do with your normal county budget, you have to prepare for 2023, 24, 25, and so on. If you start spending money with the presumption that you're going to continue programs out of the American Rescue Plan funding, you're going to have to pull that money from someplace else, which means taxpayers' pockets. So we're being very careful about this. We're still waiting. The biggest complaint across this nation right now is the municipalities are still looking for some certainty as to how we can spend the money. It's very frustrating because we get a lot of maybes, what ifs, and we believe is going to be okay. We don't have any firm guidance for the Treasury Department, so that's critically important. So what we're doing is we're laying various plans out. We brought people on board that we paid for by the American Rescue Plan funding, so we have a good structure that's ready to go. So we're prepared to ensure that any monies we spend are spent properly and maximizes the benefits of the Rockland County community.
American Rescue Plan. You mentioned that a couple of times. That also includes the rent eviction moratorium for New Yorkers and people nationwide. How important has this been in Rockland County, the rent eviction moratorium? It keeps getting pushed back now. I guess January is the new supposed cutoff point where rent-wise for renters, for landlords, et cetera, things are supposed to get back to normal. And yet I'd have to say we would expect probably that to be pushed back again come the new year. Do we need to get that back to normal, or as long as we get that funding and use it the right way, we can keep putting this deadline off and off, back and back?
Yeah, well, the problem you have here is that the longer government intercedes in the market, the worse it gets. I mean, there's no other way of putting it. Government, there was a saying that Ronald Reagan said was a phrase that would strike fear in the heart of the average American. The phrase was, "I'm from the government, I'm here to help." And that, unfortunately, we all see too often. The emergency rental assistance program stumbled out of the gate. The state was handling that. So we had tenants who were not getting assistance who needed it. We had landlords who were not getting payments that they necessarily need also, because obviously if you're a landlord, especially here in Rockland, with most of these are small landlords, they're counting on revenue to pay their bills. So and some of these bills are things such as taxes, for example, mortgages. These are fixed costs for the landlord. So this is one classic case of you see the landlord and the tenant really in the same boat. They're both in need of help. So the emergency rental assistance program is now starting to come out, in a stronger way. Rockland residents have been approved with $6.5 million in assistance, and they do provide emergency rental assistance to those who are in need of it. The income levels have been changed, and those numbers now are up to 120% of the area median income. So that is going to be helpful to a lot of Rockland County tenants and landlords. And what I would suggest to any Rocklander who's listening to this, who wants information, they should contact our Rockland County Department of Social Services, because they can provide you some details that we're not going to be able to do here in the show, obviously. And that number is 845-364-3316, 845-364-3316.
How about as we move along into the new year and we talk budgets and the planning for budgets, you're going to get, Hudson Valley at least is supposed to get over $90 million from the state of New York to battle the opioid crisis, as it turns out. And a lot of that money is going to be in the southern part of the Hudson Valley, in Westchester and in Rockland. We still have a serious opioid problem here in New York State and around the country. How important is this to get this money from Albany now?
It's as important as we want to prevent any more deaths as best as we can from the scourge of opioid abuse. And the numbers that we're going to see here in Rockland, we're of the understanding is nowhere near that number. It's going to be a single-digit number in the millions. We're not sure exactly what that will be. Now, the state of New York has been famous for grabbing money whenever it comes in and making sure they decide what to do with their money. There was legislation that was passed that as we're told, specifically directs this funding to go to programs and outreach and get it into the hands of people who do need it. I'm hopeful that expectation within the law does come through. So look, there's a lot of things we can do here to deal with this scourge of opioid abuse. We've been doing a lot on our own here in Rockland, but program and services are critically necessary in order to intercede in this scourge. So we are on this right now. We have our Office of Mental Health is focused on making sure that this information and dollars come to us as soon as possible. And once we have it, we'll be working with our partners in the community to make sure the funding gets to the places where it's needed most.
New Governor Kathy Hochul, how helpful has she been so far since she's been in office to Rockland County?
Look, I mean, we're going to have agreements and disagreements. I'd say the same thing about the previous governor. My job, frankly, as the chief executive of this county, is to make sure that I get along with every other elected official that we have to work with. That's just a responsibility. Screaming and yelling and ranting and raving and making things personal doesn't help. I know Kathy Hochul to the extent that I've met her a number of times when she was here as lieutenant governor. She seems pleasant enough. She seemed genuinely interested in what needs to be done when she came down to Rockland in the past. I'm not enamored with the fact that she seems to have aligned herself with the progressive left, particularly when it comes to issues involving public safety. I think that's a wrong-headed approach, and I say that with the 25-year background in law enforcement. I think that we're going down a wrong road as it relates to alleged criminal justice reform and bail reform. Look, nobody wants to see a young kid go to jail and not be able to get out because he can't make $100 bail. But let's understand something. That is the absolute rarity. People who go to jail and cannot get bail, more often than not, are the ones who, if they get out, will commit crimes over and over again. And that's exactly what's going on. So she and I do not agree with that. I will say that it did take a little bit of time before she reached out to the county executives, but she did do that, which I felt was positive. We're starting to have meetings now a little more often with our staff. We've made it very clear to the staff that we don't believe the best way to handle governance is through press releases. This is how the governor did it before. the previous governor. We like to have lines of communication that are open and utilized in formal ways. This way, if we've had situations where the governor has offered up a new strategy, a new plan, which he's absolutely entitled to do, obviously, the governor of New York. But if the implementation of said plan falls to the counties, I think it's a fair expectation that we know about it beforehand, so we're prepared, because the first phone call the average Rocklander is going to make is not going to be to Governor Hochul. It's going to be to Ed Day. They want to know what's going on with this. And we went through this with Governor Cuomo. We had to actually wait through a weekend at times when he would announce something on a Friday. We'd have to wait for direction, and then we were left to look at the same TV images that the average Rocklander looked at and asked to explain what the governor meant. I am not clairvoyant. I certainly am not, and certainly not clairvoyant when it came to Governor Cuomo. So it was a frustration for all the county executives in the Mid-Hudson region. I can say that because I regularly spoke with them in the control room panels that we had here in Rockland, in New York State. So, I think it's a positive at this point. And again, we can disagree on matters of policy. That should not get in the way of my ability to communicate efficiently and effectively with the Chief Executive Officer of New York State. And that's exactly what I will do.
Does the state legislature need to reform its criminal justice reforms?
They should have done it yesterday. There was 150 some odd points in that law. I think they changed 15 of them, if I remember correctly. It is beyond stubbornness at this point. By any measure you take right now, what they have done has created a nightmare. And believe it or not, we have other parts of this country right now who are even doubling down on top of what they've done. I'll give you an example. I was there with my fiance. We were at CVS the other day, and we were told that Walgreens in California now is shutting a number of their stores down because guess what happened? Shoplifting is no longer a crime. Now, I know this may sound simplistic, but what do you think happens when shoplifting is no longer a crime? You think it stops or gets worse? There's no sanction. There's no stopping. There's no arrest being made. This is the kind of logic that's being used. And what's happening is stores are being picked clean and they're shutting down. That's not what should be happening here. We have situations now where in California, again, car stops, non-enforcement car stops, some such thing they're calling them, will not be made now, and things such as auto inspections, taillights being out, things of that nature, because somehow the onus is all of a sudden on law enforcement to be civil during a car stop. I don't understand why that has become that way. I was always civil to people who I pulled the car when I was a police officer, and I expect civility back. That should be a given. But what happens when that inspection, for example, you don't get your car inspected, and you're not forced to, obviously, because you weren't stopped and told you're getting a summons if you don't, and that car fails and causes an accident? What do we say to the victims of that car crash? That we wanted to be nice, we didn't want to hurt anybody's feelings, or enforce a law that should be enforced. It makes no sense. Taillights. I had a particular approach towards rear taillights being out. I worked up in Washington Heights in Manhattan, and I drove the Palisades Parkway home every night after 4 to 12. Now you can barely see your hand in front of you on the Palisades Parkway at 2 o'clock in the morning. That's
right.
a fact. There's no lighting on that highway. I had come up on cars during the night that had no taillights, dark cars in particular, and almost rear-ended them. And I told people I pulled over, I said, look, you could promise me all you want that you're going to get your taillights fixed. But if I let you go here, I'm just got to trust you're going to do it. We were able to issue summonses, and with that, you had 48 hours to come back to a local precinct and show the police officer there that the lights were fixed. With that, they gave you a form, and you mailed the form and the ticket in, and it was no fine. There was no points in his license to begin with, for that kind of violation. But now there was no fine. All you had to do was get the lights fixed. Why is that a problem? This was such a smart, simple thing to do. Now we're being told, or cops are being told, you can't pull a car over with the lights out. What do you tell the family who rear ends that car and their 10-year-old kids in the front seat or the rear seat and ends up becoming a victim to that accident for only one reason? Somebody was not allowed to enforce the law. This has gone to almost sheer madness at this point. It's just not a viable way to go. And I really wish that some of our elected officials would start focusing on critical issues as opposed to trying to manage police resources.
Rockland County Executive Ed Day here on Rockland Talk Radio. We thank you for coming back and joining us again. Hope we get to talk again real soon. Thank you, Ed Day.
Always a pleasure, John.
Thank you. Ed Day here on Rockland Talk Radio. I'm John Marino. This is the Cup of Joe political show produced by Sharc Creative. Made possible by Robeson Oil, the house that service built. By Lipolis Electric. Don't be left in the dark. Get Lipolis. By Hightower Westchester, managing your wealth up and down the Hudson Valley to a fiduciary standard. By White Plains Hospital. By Michael Labriola Landscape Design and Construction of Armonk. They work all around the Hudson Valley and beyond. And by Tompkins Mahopac Bank. Catch all of our Rockland, Westchester, Putnam, Dutchess, Orange, and Fairfield County Talk Radio programming on our YouTube channel, Sharc Creative YouTube.